Right, warm welcome, parents and some children with us this afternoon to talk all things non-verbal reasoning. So I'm just going to share my slides with you. Hopefully you'll be able to see this okay. And we will be going through lots of different questions this afternoon, hopefully giving you lots of tips and hints as well. Now, I'm also hoping you're going to hold on until the end of the workshop where I will be talking a little bit about some of the questions that appeared in the exam for our students this year. So I think it'd be really beneficial if you stay for that point. So I'm putting that at the end to make you stay on for the rest of the journey this afternoon. But I will be revealing the question types that came up. That's not to say that they will be exactly the same when your child takes the test, but it certainly does give us a good indication of the types of questions that are being selected by GL assessment. Now, I think it's also important to mention here as well that in terms of non-verbal reasoning, then that is part of the Kendrick test. If your child is going for Kendrick School in Reading, it is part of the Slough Consortium. It is also part of Buckinghamshire as well. Where non-verbal reasoning is no longer used, that is Reading Boys. So if you are currently studying a Reading Boys syllabus and you're focusing on future stories where you do things like creative writing and critical thinking, you don't have to study non-verbal reasoning. If you, of course, though, have decided that you would like to do the Slough Consortium as well as the Reading Boys test, then of course you do need to make sure you've covered off this aspect. So that might be the reason why we have some students here from Reading, is because you're also going to go for the Slough test as well. Okay, so just a little bit of background on what is non-verbal reasoning. So non-verbal reasoning is about shapes and patterns. And there are a number of different question types that we can categorize into the following areas. So we have something called similarities and differences. We have pairs, or sometimes called analogies, series and grids, and we also have codes. Now, as I said at the beginning, if anyone arrived just after I mentioned this, we are just going to focus on the 2D questions this afternoon. We'll have a separate workshop where we deal with the three-dimensional questions. So things like cubes and nets and fold and punch and hidden shape. So if you're a bit surprised why I don't cover those questions today, that's the reason why. We're kind of section it up. We can have the 2D questions, and then we'll focus on the 3D ones. In previous years, we've tried to put them all into the same workshop, and I always find, we never quite have enough time to go through every single question type. But by doing that, by splitting it out, that will really help. So those are the categories, and we'll be having a look at some of those different question types within those categories as we go along. I also thought it was worth just giving you the section that comes out of the Buckinghamshire familiarisation booklet, which again talks a little bit about the non-verbal skills that will be tested. And I'm just going to read to you what it says on the screen. So in the non-verbal reasoning section, you'll be asked to consider the relationship between shapes. That's where you have to look at the similarities and the differences. You will need to work out how shapes are similar or different and identify changes between shapes in a sequence. Don't be surprised if in some books you're using at home or the ones that we've provided for you at Teach It Right, they actually give the question types different names. So for example, sequences can sometimes be called series. So it doesn't matter, they're very similar in terms of what they have to do. And it may be that, for example, in the actual exam, they give them a title like pictures, for example, which is completely new. But I'm sure the question types will be very familiar. A shape may also be rotated or increased in size, and we'll talk about those different variables as we go through this afternoon. Some questions may also involve codes, where you have to match parts of a shape with a letter or letters. And we'll again be looking at those. The second part to this is thinking about how a picture or a shape may move around in your head and thinking about what it would look like if it was rotated. That, of course, is more around the three-dimensional questions, or what they describe as spatial reasoning. One of the things that we teach at Teach It Right, certainly at the beginning of the academic year, for year four and for year five, when we first introduce non-verbal reasoning to them, we actually teach them a mnemonic. Now, I'd like to think most of the children know what this mnemonic is. I can see lots of children's faces in my little eye line there, and they think, oh, yes, I know exactly what that means. And the reason that we teach this mnemonic is to help them identify the right variables. So you imagine if you're presented with a question, let's just imagine it was odd one out, and you're thinking, well, how am I going to work this out? How am I going to solve it? Well, this really helps because it gets them to think about the right kind of variables that may well be tested. Now, there is a reason why someone has some soggy socks there, and there's a very rotten looking orange. This will all make sense in a minute. Okay, so we teach a mnemonic. Now, if you're not too sure what a mnemonic is, particularly if the children here and they don't really know that terminology, that means where we have a series of letters that help you remember something. So if I think of mnemonics I learnt at school, because. So big elephants can always understand small elephants. Now, that's a series of words that help me remember how to spell because. I know there are different ones, aren't there, for because. If I had to learn the rainbow colours, I might think of Richard of York gave battle in vain. And those letters all stand for the different colours of the rainbow. And it helps me remember it. And this is very, very similar. So I'll tell you what the mnemonic is in terms of how we remember it later, but let's just go down through. And it might be something that you want to just scribble down that will really help your child, particularly when they're at home. If they get stuck, you can say, oh, have you thought about your mnemonic? Have you tested all those different variables? So let's go down through. So first one is shape, and then we've got position, and we've got angle, number, size, shading, rotation, overlapping, and finally, symmetry. Now, the way that we get the children to remember it is we make up a silly little rhyme or something that's really memorable. So the one I always go to is silly people always need soggy socks. Okay, so silly people always need soggy socks. That helps me remember the first part. And then the second part, rotten oranges smell. So there you go. That's the reason for the two pictures, is to help me remember those different letters. There's another one at the beginning you can have, which is silly penguins always need slippery surfaces. Brilliant. I'm not going to forget that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to deal with these different variables in turn. And I want to kind of explore a little bit more with you about how these relate to non-verbal reasoning. And hopefully when we then come to the questions that we'll be doing together, you'll be able to say, oh yes, I've used position to get that answer, or I've used number, or I use size and shading to get that answer. And it all starts to come together. So we really think this is the foundation of being really good at non-verbal, is understanding what to look for. Non-verbal reasoning is not generally a topic which is taught at school. I don't think many children will have actually covered non-verbal reasoning in their classes, and hence why it's something that we need to cover off, because it is a big part of the exam. We're looking at sort of 25% of the test is made up of non-verbal reasoning questions. So it's really important that our students are really confident and really good at identifying the answers within things like codes and sequences. So let's go and have a look at how this mnemonic all works. So first one is shape. Now, this might seem an obvious thing to say, but actually children need to have a really good knowledge of shape. And that's identifying maybe slightly obscure shapes, things like trapeziums and parallelograms, and maybe shapes that are not just your triangle and your square and your circle. So we would say to children, make sure you know, for example, how many sides a pentagon's got, how many sides a hexagon's got, how many sides an octagon got. Because when you actually come to do non-verbal reasoning, part of being very good at it is being able to explain what the shapes and things are doing. And if you can't recognize an octagon, or you don't know how many sides a pentagon has got, you'll find that quite difficult. So if you're particularly in year 4, some parents I know will be here from year 4, a good exercise is to actually make sure your child knows all their 2D shapes. And you can easily just test them, maybe in the car on the way to school. You know, how many sides has a nonagon got? How many sides has a hexagon got? And see if they can tell you, because that's really important. So, knowledge of shape. And of course, non-verbal reasoning is all about shapes. The next part of the mnemonic is position. And this is where we have to think about where shapes are placed. So for example, if it was a sequence, has it been moving around the square? So the position of the shapes is really important. Now, I thought just to get our brains going a little bit, we could have a go at this question. And what we've got is we've got 5 shapes. We should have 5 shapes at the top. Okay, so we've got 4 currently. So one of these belongs with those 4 at the top. So it's finding the shape which will join those 4 shapes at the top. So you're more than welcome, if you want to have a go in the chat, type what you think your answer is. So which one goes in here? Now, it's not a sequence. It's about finding the shape that belongs with those 4 at the top. So if you want to just have a little go. Someone asking whether we need Menti today. No, we don't need Menti. Okay, so we've got some answers already. Excellent. Okay, really good. Well done. Parents, you're of course more than welcome to have a go. I won't call any names out or say who's put what, but I know already we've got quite a few different answers, which is fine. I think at the moment I can only see one though that has it correct. So let's go through and have a little look. One of the things that's really important with nonverbal is that children look at every answer option, because sometimes those answer options can be very, very close, or they might have a subtle difference. Now, one of the questions that may be on your mind, parents, today is to get a bit of an understanding around how long do children have. So when you're answering a question like that, if that was a question that you got in the exam, how long would your child have? Well, we look at roughly 30 seconds per question. So if we think about the Slough test this year, they only had 2 sections. There was 20 questions in each, and they had 10 minutes per section. So if you work out the maths, of course, that's 30 seconds a question. So when you're practicing questions at home, certainly if you're in year 5 now, you want to be a little bit aware of how long you're taking, because you haven't got that long. 30 seconds is enough time to solve it. But if you feel yourself taking a minute or 2 minutes, you want to be moving on to the next question. So just be aware, I would say, about your time management and how long you're taking. Right, now you want to know what the answer is. So let's go through what's happening. So the first thing we notice is all of them contain a circle. So if there's any down here which are not circles, and C is actually an oval, so it's a little bit elongated, isn't it? So that's more of an oval shape, so it's not C. The next thing to look at is the little shape and see its position. Hence why we're looking at position here, because all of these shapes have one corner or one vertex touching the circle. So anywhere it's overlapping or it's not touching, we can rule them out. So we can get rid of B, it's not that one. We can get rid of D because it's got 2 points touching. And we can also eliminate A because that one's got 2 points touching. Therefore, the answer is E. Now, when I'm trying to find the questions to go through with you, I want to just make sure that they relate to that mnemonic. So that is very much about position. It's having an understanding of the position of the shapes. And that hopefully is what some of you have put in the chat, which is great, which has gone for E. Okay, so we've looked at shape. We've said how important that is. We've discussed position. We're now going to have a look at angle. Now, angle is one of those things where children are not going to be necessarily measuring an angle. So I would say at school, children should know about things like right angles. They should know about obtuse angles, reflex angles, acute angles. But you don't ever have to measure an angle in an exam. You don't have any mathematical equipment to do that. It's not like you have a protractor or anything like that. But this question has a little bit of a link, I suppose, with angles. So what do we have to do here? We've got two shapes on the left, and one of these shapes from A to E belongs with those two shapes on the left. I always talk, when I teach these kind of questions, I talk about the shapes sort of being in the same family. It's like, well, what have they got in common? If you think about your family, have you got the same hair color? Have you got the same eye color? So when you're looking at these shapes, look at what they have in common. So what I'm always tempted to do, particularly with these kind of questions, is actually block out the answer options. Because initially, the first thing that you need to do is you need to understand why these two are the same. What is similar about these two shapes on the left? Okay. Now, if you'd like to have another go at answering this one, please feel free in the chat just to type your answer in. Which of those shapes belongs with those two on the left? Brilliant. Well done, guys. Having a good go at this. Superb. Nothing like exercising your brains a little bit on a Sunday afternoon. Okay, fantastic. Now, we can only choose one letter. So if you've gone for more than one letter, you just need to think again because you can only have one that belongs in that group. Okay. And that would be the same with every non-verbal reasoning question. There's only ever going to be one answer. Okay. So first of all, let's decide why these two are the same. Well, you'll notice that they have sort of three different sized rectangles. And the way that they overlap is that, for example, if we look at the smaller rectangle, so this one here, it kind of bisects the medium-sized rectangle and it goes right the way through. So I can eliminate A because, as you can see here, look, it finishes there. So that's not correct. We can also eliminate B because of the way that they're overlapping. They're not overlapping in the same way as those. We also need to recognise that the medium-sized rectangle, and I'm just going to do a little outline so you can see the one I'm referring to, also has the bigger rectangle overlapping it, or the wider rectangle, if you like. Okay, so again, maybe those colours help you a little bit just to see exactly what we're looking for. So if we come back and look at C, that's doing everything we want it to do. We've got the little rectangle bisecting right the way through, and the relationship between the medium and the large one is correct as well. Whereas D, well, that's not quite right. This one's not overlapping correctly, so we need to rule that one out. And again, with E, we have a look at the little rectangle here. That's not correct either. So the ones of you that chose C, well done. I can see some cheering going on there. I think even I saw, I think, is it you, Lily, going, yes, I got it, smashed it. Well done, Lily. Very good. Okay. So we've looked at shape, we've looked at position, we've talked about angle. We're now going to move on to something which is very common in nonverbal, but often children forget to do it. And that is number. A number is where you need to count maybe the number of sides or the number of shapes inside another shape. So the relationship sometimes between shapes is really important. So I'm just going to give you an example here of whereby if I had a square and then I had a triangle overlapping, sometimes you might see that as 7. Now you're saying, well, where do I get 7 from? Well, 3 sides on a triangle, 4 sides on a square. So it might then be that you have other shapes. For example, if I had a rectangle and I also had a triangle, well, that would also be 7. So there are occasions where you need to link the shapes together and find a link. One very common thing that often happens is the number of shapes inside a shape relates to the number of sides. So again, if I choose a triangle and if I was to do let's do 3 little dots inside or 3 little circles, the number of dots is the same as the number of sides. So that is also something to consider, that number is not only just about the shape on its own, but the relationship between the shapes. So have a go at this one, everybody, because this is an odd one out question. So we have 4 shapes here, and one of them is different from the rest. So can you work out which one is different? Most importantly, why? Another lot of you having a good old go at this, which is fantastic. Parents as well, feel free to put in your answers to the questions that you're seeing. Okay, so again, we're looking at about 30 seconds to try and solve it. So first thing to see is we've got shapes inside, and we've got shapes with various points and things on. So we're just going to have a little look at this first one. We can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I'm just going to write that down so I don't forget. And how many circles have we got inside? We've got 2. So there's a difference there of 3. If we come to B, we've got 4 dots on the shape, 4 vertices, 4 corners, and then we've got 3 dots inside. If we come to the next one, this one's got 6 corners or 6 points, and then we've got 5 inside. So at the moment, these have only got a difference of 1, whereas A, you might remember, had a difference of 3. So if we come to the next one, this one's got 5 points on it. How many circles inside? There are 4. So the answer, and a lot of you put that in the chat, is A. So again, looking at those relationships between shapes inside and the shape outside, how does it relate to each other is really important. So don't forget, children, when you're doing things like odd one out, don't forget to count things. Number is a really important variable. So we've looked at shape, we've looked at position, we've looked at angle, we've looked at number, and the next one you might remember is all to do with shading. Now, I thought we would just do a little activity here, particularly if you're a parent that's attended a lot of these workshops over the years. You might remember that I tend to do this because it's just a little bit of fun. But I'd like you to have a go on a piece of paper somewhere, and children can do this as well. I'd like you to draw as many different types of line as you possibly can. So I'm going to give you, let me say, I'll give you a minute to draw as many different types of line as you possibly can. Then I'd like you in the chat to say how many you've got altogether. How many different types of line can you draw? Someone's already got a number written in the chat. Can you think of any more types of line that you could have? What types of line do you think you might see? And then in the chat, record down how many you've got. How many different types of line have you managed to draw? If you've got a sibling with you, might like to have a go at the same time. A little bit of competition. Oh, right. Someone's got a good number there. It's excellent. Well done. 10 more seconds. How many more can you draw? Wow, fantastic. Excellent stuff. We'll put some round of applause in there. Some thumbs up. Brilliant. Okay, time is up. So, wow. So, I think the highest number I can see so far are not sure 111 types of line. I would be surprised if you've got that many. That's a pretty impressive number. Maybe 11, maybe you meant to put, but anyway, some good numbers in there. What you can do now is I'd like you to check it against the lines that I'm going to reveal now. How many of them did you actually have? Now, there is a reason why I've got you to do this activity. It's because line type is actually quite important in the 11 plus because you do have to look at the line type. So let's have a little look at some of them that you may have got already. So did you think of just a solid line? Just a solid line. Very common, of course. Dashed line. Did you have a dashed line? Did you have a dotted line? Now, I do need to point out here that there is a difference between a dotted line and a dashed line. Okay, so your dotted line, of course, is like a series of full stops, if you like, and then your dashed line is like that. There is a difference in the 11 plus between those two. Did you maybe have a really thin line? Slightly different from a thick line. Now, these are maybe the slightly obscure ones or the slightly different ones. Did you include a curved line? Did you include a zigzag line? Did you have one that's maybe more of an S shape? Did you have an arrow on the end of your line? Did you have a line where you bisect it with another lot of lines? Had you thought of doing, like we call it an asterisk, don't we? An asterisk line like that, like a series of snowflakes. Yeah. And actually then you could come up with all different types because maybe you could do a dashed and a dotted, dashed and a dotted. So you could come up with all different types. So well done if you managed to do, as I say, in the chat, I could see some really high numbers of types of line. But we incorporate this under shading. And of course, shapes can be shaded in different ways. I did have a child once say to me, why on earth is there no colour in the 11 plus with non-verbal? Well, no, that's not something that happens. So the way that they vary it is to shade it maybe in grey, maybe in bold. We talk about hatched shading and lattice patterns. And as you can see down there, there's lots of different ways that you can still shade something in, even if you can't shade it in colour. Okay. Someone's saying in the chat, probably quite sensibly, you could have an infinite amount of lines. I guess you probably could. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly could have a lot, couldn't you? So we're done shading. The next one to look at as part of our mnemonic is size. And of course, children need to recognize that shapes can be different sizes. Now, this is probably a very, very simple question that I won't insult your intelligence by asking you the answer, but it was just to point out how shapes can be different sizes. So we've got a large, we've got a medium, we've got a small, we've got a large, we've got a medium, we've got a small, large, medium, small, whereas this sort of goes against the rule because it starts at the back with a medium, then it goes large, then it goes small. This one is large, medium, small. So the answer would be D. And I just wanted to illustrate to you there how size can play a part. You might also argue that that's also about order, because actually all the sizes are the same, but the order of those sizes is different. So that's something also to consider. We move on to our last three parts of our mnemonic now, and this is rotation. You might remember I had rotten oranges smell for my last three words. And rotation is a really key part of the 11 plus. Now, I do think it's also worth talking to parents about how you can support your child a little bit at home with things like rotation. And that could be maybe getting a set of keys like we've got here and actually getting your child to rotate them so they're in the same position. And everyday objects that you can rotate so children can see what they look like. So the idea behind this one is this key here is replicated somewhere here. So one of the options, A to E, is the same key, but it's just been rotated. Now, I thought it might be worth actually showing you here. So we've got the key in this position. And when we rotate it, if we rotate it around, we know it can't make A. It doesn't matter how much we twist it, turn it, it's not going to form A. If we turn it up like that, we also know that we can't make B. So we can eliminate B. And then when we look at C, you can see that that is the same key. So if I've had it like that initially, go through sort of 180 degrees, it makes the same shape. So again, rotation is a really key part of looking at shape, particularly when we look at things like analogies and sequences. So really, really important. Well done to the ones of you that had a go at that one in the chat and putting C down. You're absolutely correct. Then that is the same key. One of the other key parts of nonverbal is overlapping. So this is how shapes can go on top of other shapes. You might remember back on this one, this would be also those shapes would be described as overlapping each other. Another little exercise which you can do at home is actually get your child to draw some shapes and actually see if they can make one shape overlap the other one. And that can be quite good fun. So you can actually get the child to see the order that they're in. Maybe you could make some sort of abstract art out of it if you want to, just to show them again how those shapes look when one is on top of another one. This one is another odd one out, and I would like you to have a go at this one. And it does incorporate, of course, an element of overlapping. So if I give you 30 seconds, see if you can work it out. Fantastic. Yeah. Lots of you getting the right answer here. And if you did choose E, you are absolutely correct. This is a little bit more tricky, but it's just to notice that inside the bigger, larger shapes, obviously inside the heart here, the black bit that overlaps, shaded in, bold, always appears on the left-hand side. So that's always on the left, it's always on the left. However, when you come to look at this one, of course, it appears on the right-hand side. So as well as having overlapping in it, is also an element of position there as well, the position of the shape. So again, well done if you did go for E, absolutely brilliant. And we come to our last word of our mnemonic, and that is symmetry. And this is where we need to think about a shape having the same on both sides if a mirror line or a symmetrical line is drawn. Symmetry would be something that children probably do touch on, certainly within their maths curriculum. And there are parts of non-verbal reasoning that, of course, do relate to maths. We've already talked about shape. We've already referred to number. We're now talking about symmetry. So sometimes people ask, well, why is non-verbal used to test children? Well, non-verbal reasoning has a huge mathematical element to it. And yes, if children are good at maths, it may well support their knowledge with non-verbal. There's also theories around non-verbal reasoning being a very innate trait. In other words, children can either see it or they can't. Our belief is very different from that, in that we think that children, of course, once they're shown techniques and strategies and they practice something, they will get better and better. And I know of children that I've worked with personally who actually, when we started doing the non-verbal, they found it really, really difficult. They found it difficult to spot the patterns, the shapes, but I think really trust in the fact that your practice, your lessons that you'll have around this and the homework that you do, will actually really develop your non-verbal reasoning skills. So if you're someone who's at home and you're thinking, oh, I find this a little bit tricky, don't worry. The more you do of it, the better you get. And I would say that for myself as an adult, and I came to do non-verbal reasoning as an adult. I never did it as a child, but the more I've done, the more I've looked at questions, and I also write a lot of non-verbal questions myself now, the better understanding I've got. So, let's say, don't worry if you're finding it tricky. So this one is, as I say, all about symmetry. Some of you I know are having a go at it already and have outlined that in the chat. So let's get a line of symmetry and see what's going on. The interesting thing here is actually the use of the dashed line and the double line. Usually a dashed line indicates symmetry rather than a double line. But we're going to look at the double line first and say that actually the double line has made the first shape symmetrical, but not the second. But then when we look at this one, yes, that's been split exactly in half. So is that one. It's the same on both sides. And so is that one. So therefore, we can deduce that the answer, and lots of you said this in the chat, is B. One thing I appreciate that you couldn't do in a pencil paper test, which is what you will be doing, is actually get an arrow like that, like I've got, and draw it on. But what you, of course, can do, you will have a pencil, and you will only be allowed to use a pencil. You can't use a pen. You could actually draw in your lines of symmetry if you want to, and that will certainly maybe reveal something to you as the answer. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about this mnemonic. Shape, position, angle, number, size, shading, rotation, overlapping, and symmetry. Every non-verbal reasoning question that is two-dimensional will apply to this. So this is a real good, as I said at the beginning, if you're a bit late coming into the call, is a real good foundation for understanding non-verbal reasoning. Someone asking a good question. Why don't we look at the dotted line? Well, we could. Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. I was just interested to see that, of course, with the dotted line, it's not necessarily always indicating symmetry, whereas with the double line, it is. So, of course, on C, you can see here the dotted line. Well, that's not symmetrical because this is not the same size. So again, sometimes it's a bit of trial and error and testing different ones. Okay, let's go and have a look now at some individual question types. So we're going to look first of all at find a shape which is most alike. We have looked at some of these already. So this is where we're given some shapes on the left. Now you might remember from the one that we did previously, there was actually only two shapes on the left, whereas what we've got here is we've got three shapes on the left. And we want to establish what they have in common. So first of all, have a little look at that and see if you can work out which of these answer options belongs with that shape on the left. Now, just to add a little bit more intrigue into what we're doing, I am going to put up a timer because I think, again, it gets you to think, right, that's roughly how long I would have to solve that particular question. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds and see if you can work it out. Which shape belongs? Okay, so lots of you going for E as the answer. Are you correct? Well, let's just have a little look first for what the relationship is. Hopefully you remembered maybe something I'd mentioned to you earlier about counting things up. So this particular question is very much related to number because the number of little lines that are on the edges of the shape relates to the number of sides. So we've got 3 lines, 3 sides, 4 lines, 4 sides, 4 and 4 again. Now, it's also about the position of those lines. So we can eliminate A, we know that that's wrong. It's only got 2 anyway, but actually they're not bisecting the line. They're actually on the point. We've got 5 and 4, so we know that's wrong. This one's got 4 and 3, so that's incorrect. D's only got 2 and 4, and E, of course, is correct. So well done. Some cheering going on again, getting it correct. So brilliant. Well done. So number again, really, really relevant to what you're doing. Now, I'm not going to spend too much more time doing these, but I am just going to give you one of these just to have a go at. I would say this one's maybe a little bit more tricky maybe than this one. So what we tend to find, certainly with the books that we use at Teach It Right, if you are year four, you tend to focus on 8 to 9 in terms of the difficulty level. At the beginning of year five, you do 9 to 10 books. And then as we get nearer to the exam, we start to introduce more 10 to 11. Does it get any harder than that? No. In terms of for the 11 plus, that's where it gets to. So when you get your 10 to 11 books, that's really alongside the difficulty that you'll be having in your actual exam. So if you can cope with that, that's brilliant. One of the things also to mention to parents while I think about it is that if you are looking for more nonverbal reasoning, and appreciate that if you feel that don't always want to do it online, you want to print out some papers, the GL assessment familiarization papers for nonverbal are brilliant. So I will just get a link for you now, whereby you can uh, print out these at home and you can there are plenty of papers there for you to have a go at. So I'm just going to copy this into Google so we can get the link for you, and I will put it in the chat and you can download these. They are available for all 4 subjects, and you can click on the subjects that you want to do. What I'd also suggest as well, if you do print these out, is that you actually try and think maybe about using them as good exam practice. So if there are 20 questions, for example, giving your child 10 minutes to try and solve them, work them out. That I would say is more for the year five pupils than the year four pupils. I don't think the year four pupils should be doing too much timing at this stage. I think it's more about the understanding of what they're doing. But as you get into year five, you can start maybe having a little bit more time associated to it. If you find that you've set the time for 10 minutes and you haven't got through all the questions, still keep going. Yeah, so get through all of them, keep going, doesn't matter how long it takes you. And then maybe the next time round, when you do maybe another bit of timed practice, you could maybe shave off another 30 seconds or a minute. And then gradually, I'm sure you'll get to the stage where you're doing them a lot quicker. Right, so I did say I'm going to give you one that maybe is a bit more challenging. So this is the same type of question. You have to find a shape that belongs with the group. I did say I'd put a timer up here, so let's get one of those. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Off you go. Okay, time is up. So go and have a little look at the chat, see what answers we've got. We've got a couple of different ones. We've got some A's, got some C's. Let's see if we can work it out together. So let's have a look at these 3 shapes on the left here. So the first thing I've noticed is that we've got these overlapping black ovals. Now, the number of the black ovals is probably irrelevant. It doesn't really matter because I've got 2 here, 1 on this one and 3 on that one. But it is actually how they're overlapping. So you probably noticed that they're overlapping on the corner. So every time there's a vertex, they're overlapping. So when it appears on an edge, I'm going to eliminate it. So it's not on B. Look, that one appears on the edge, not on the corner. It's not C. That one's also on the edge. The other thing that you probably spotted with your beady eyes is to see that actually we've got 3 triangular black shapes inside. So I could rule out D and I can also rule out E. So if you did go for A, well done you, because you've obviously realized that not only is it about this shape, this oval shape, it's also about the fact that there's a black triangle created inside the hexagon, the pentagon, and the octagon. So well done if you went for that one. Okay, shall we move on now to something slightly different and go and have a look at a multiple choice sheet? Because I thought I would just show you, and I'm sure you're very interested to know how the children record their answers down. So there is a separate multiple choice sheet. So GL Assessment give them a sheet that looks very similar to this. All the information that's at the top of the sheet would be filled out already. So that's one thing not to worry about. All the child needs to do is just double check it's their name, their school, their date of birth. Everything else will be taken care of in terms of the numbers will already be there. But it is always worth just double checking it's you. I'm sure it will be. Now, the way that, excuse me, the way that the children record their answers is they use a horizontal line. Now, one of the things I do want to point out here, which I think is really important, is that when they go through the non-verbal sections, they will also go through the practice questions with you. And you'll see here, they're called P1 and P2 here. And sometimes there'll be 2, maybe 3 or 4. The children need to record that down. They're not given any marks, but they should record it down, because what we don't want the child to believe is that this is question 1, question 2, and then they treat this as question 3. So it's really important they participate fully in the practice questions. So for example, if it was practice was A, you'd record down A. The second one was D, you'd record a horizontal line like that. Now, of course, with non-verbal reasoning, there may be an element sometimes that you change your mind. You think, oh, actually, I don't think it's that one. I think it's that one, because I've double checked and I really don't think so. Of course, in that instance, you would rub it out and then you would put the right answer. What we don't want to see, say if you chose A and then you change your mind to E, is just putting a cross through that, because what would happen, the computer that scans over the sheet would actually pick that up as a mark. So you want to make sure that it's completely rubbed out, so you're only showing one answer per question. And as you can imagine, as you go through, you just want to double check you know what question you're on. So you can see the numbers in the top corner there, and that indicates how many in the section. Now, one of the reasons that I've shown you this particular multiple choice sheet is because with a lot of the sections last year, there was 20 questions in there, and you had, as I said earlier, about exactly 10 minutes to work them out. Okay. Please do feel free, parents, if there's anything I've said that you want more clarification on, or you want some more detail on in terms of non-verbal reasoning, don't hesitate to ask. I did say that at the beginning, and if some of you have arrived a bit later into the call, if there's something related to non-verbal that you would like to know, please don't hesitate to ask. One of the things I did say at the beginning as well was that we would separate out non-verbal reasoning from spatial reasoning. What we've done in the past is we've done the workshop where we combine all the different question types together, and I've always felt we get to the end to do spatial and we don't really have quite enough time to get through all the strategies and the question types. So there will be a separate spatial reasoning workshop that we will hold in the new year, early in the new year, to go through those question types with you as well. But I think it's probably important to recognize as well that the non-verbal reasoning from last year contained very few spatial reasoning questions. They were predominantly 2D. Okay, shall we go and have a look at another question type? So one that we have shown you in the mnemonic was odd one out, and this again is a very popular question type where we look for one shape which is different from the rest. So there's one there for you to have a go at, and I'm just going to put the timer up. And if you want to put the answer in the chat, you can. Try and do some likes in there if you get it right. Well done. All of you having a really good go at this one. Excellent. It's a little bit more tricky, so you've got to identify which one is different from the rest. Excellent. Well done. See some good answers there. Some of you changing your mind, which is fine. You've had a look at it in a bit more detail. Right, so the time is up. So let's have a little look. So again, when you have separate shapes, and what I mean by that is we've got a littler shape shaded in black, and then we've got the larger shapes overlapping each other. And you've probably noticed on this that the littler shape, so this shape here, can fit quite snugly into where it overlaps. So this triangle, for example, could fit into there. This rectangle that we've got on the outside could fit into there. And if we come and have a look back at A, you really do need to know your shapes here, because this shape here, if I was to draw it, is a little bit like a car windscreen. It's a trapezium. Whereas when we come to look at this long shape here, that's a parallelogram. So a parallelogram is a bit like a rectangle that's fallen over a little bit. Okay, same with a rhombus and a square. So that, if I was to pick that shape up and try and fit it into this space here, it wouldn't fit. It's not the same shape. So the answer, if you did go for this in the chat, is A. So well done. I'll try and do a few little likes in here for those ones that chose A, because that was a tricky little question, but really did involve you having a good knowledge of shape there. So well done. Sorry if I've missed any of you out, but well done if you chose A in there. There we go. Thumbs up for you. Brilliant. Let's move on now to I think because we've covered odd one out quite a bit, I'm actually going to move forward to a question type we haven't looked at so far today, and that is analogies. Sometimes it can be called connections. Sometimes, excuse me, it can be called pairs. So they do have lots of different names, these question types. So what will we have to do? Let's have a look first of all. So we're given a pair of shapes. This shape, the first one here, turns into the second shape. And the key aspect with this question type is to understand how has this changed, this first shape, to become the second shape. And then we're going to replicate that or repeat that process with the third shape to become the fourth shape. And of course, the fourth shape is we have to choose from A to E. And I always break this down to look at one thing at a time. So the first thing you would realize is that this sort of basket shape has been rotated 180 degrees. So if you think about the shape that we've got here, this sort of looks like a lamp in a way, doesn't it? Or a torch. It's going to have the trapezium at the bottom, and then we're going to have the square on the top. So any which that is not correct, so if we look at B, that's not right, D's not right, that just helps limit our choices. Now, elimination is a really key part of what we're doing here, that we can rule out a lot of the answers which we know are wrong. And even if that leaves us with 2, that's a 50% chance rather than a 20% chance of getting it right. So ruling out the ones that are not right can really help you. I would really encourage the kids to do that when they're working things out. The next thing that we know is that when it was rotated, it also added in an extra line into what we would sort of describe as the handle. So we end up sort of having double lines. So when we end up rotating this one, we do want to see that there's another line inside there for the trapezium. It's not A, we haven't got that line inside there. And E, interestingly, added another set of lines inside the square, which is not correct. So again, if you chose C, C seems quite popular this afternoon, doesn't it? But well done if you got that correct. I know I said there in sort of jest, really, that there's been a lot of C's. Do realise you will never, ever find a pattern. So it never goes A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, and you think, oh, I know what's got to be next. It's got to be A. It's very much randomised. So, yeah, don't ever believe that you've identified a pattern with what you're doing. Excellent stuff. Well done to those C's. Excellent stuff. Well done. Okay. So analogies, again, something that we practice a lot at Teach It Right, developing that understanding of analogies. Right, we'll move on now to a question type again, which did appear within the exams this year, and that is something called codes. And you might remember at the beginning of the workshop, I talked to you about the different categories of questions. So we've already looked at similarities and differences. We've also focused just there on pairs. We're now just having a little look at some code related questions. I must admit, out of all the non-verbal questions, I think these are probably my favourite. I think these are really good fun. They're quite puzzly. They all involve you trying to sort of crack a code, which I think is really good fun. And hopefully you really enjoy these. And parents do have a go at these. They're quite good, I think. So the way that these work is we are given a code that represents a shape. And we have to work out what our test shape code is. And the way that we break the code is we look for letters that are the same. And we then ask ourselves the question, what is similar about those shapes? When the letters, of course, are different, we're asking ourselves the reverse of that question, as in what is different about those shapes. So maybe let's have a look first of all at the top row. We've got F, we've got a G, and we've got an H. And they are all different. So what is different about all these shapes? Well, it's nothing to do with the oval, because we'll notice here this oval shading is exactly the same and the shape is exactly the same. But we do have a difference in this black shape here. It's the same shape, but the position of the shape is different. So it's in the middle over here, it's at the top on this one, and it's at the bottom on this shape. If we come to our test shape, you'll notice that it's in the middle. So therefore, we need an F. Now, I tend to get the children to write the first letter down. Sometimes I'll get them to do 2 lines and say, right, write the first letter down, because you can then eliminate the ones that don't have that first letter. So it's not A because I've got a G. It's not D. It's also not C. I've only got 2 left. And it's back to my kind of 50% rule of, right, I've limited my choices. Now, some of the children I'm sure here this afternoon have probably spotted that the P and the P are the same because of the shading, as we talked briefly about earlier. Therefore, the Q is what we're looking for, because this is a blank oval, so is this. So it's FQ. So the answer is B. Now, well done. You only need to type the answer in once and I'll see it, I'm sure, but well done if you did choose B. Excellent stuff. And what we will find often with these kind of codey questions is they will have those variables again that link very much to the mnemonic that we looked at earlier. So in this one, I would say we're looking at position because it's the position of the black circle. And we've also focused on shading. So position and shading would be the variables that get us the answer. Okay. As I say, these are really good fun. So wondered whether you'd like to have a go at this one here. So I'm not quite sure why there's a big blue box. Oh, it's because we've got more there. Okay, let's do something slightly different, and let's do 3 questions here. This will get you on your really get you going this afternoon. We'll sort of number them 1, 2, and 3. You can put your answers in the chat like that. So 1, what your answer is, 2, what your answer is, 3, what your answer is, and we will do it in a minute and a half. So I'm going to put them there, and I'm going to give you 3 questions this time, really put you through your paces, and you can record your answers down, parents and children, in the chat. Okay, so 1 minute 30, starting now. If you do all 3 and then put it in the chat, I can then double check what you're doing. Okay, everyone, that is time up, so well done. Thank you very much for so sensibly typing them out there. Harriet and Lily typing them up, Mateus typing them into the chat. Well done, brilliant. So you want to obviously find out whether you've got these right. So shall we go through them and have a little look? So let's start off by looking at the top row. We've got two V's. So again, I'm going to ask myself, why are they similar? We talked about line style, didn't we, earlier? So of course we've got a bold line, dotted line. We need a dotted line, so it's going to be a W. We're going to rule out that one, rule out that one. Then the bottom line of letters, we'll notice they're all different, and it's the position of that black dot. So we want it kind of in the middle, which is going to mean that we need F. So the answer is WF. So if you went for 1A, you are absolutely correct. Well done. Brilliant stuff. Number two, a lot of these are actually about position, aren't they? So first of all, let's look at the top lines. We've got K, L, M. They're all different. They're all in slightly different positions. So this line here is at the top. This one's sort of at the bottom, and this one's in the middle. We need it at the bottom. So we know that we need an L as our first letter. And then the two G's, we've got to identify why they are the same. And the reason they are the same is because of the direction of those lines. So we actually need the lines going in the same direction as the G. So the answer is LG. Now, no one told me off there. What I should have done after I got the L is crossed out the K's and the M's, really, shouldn't I? Okay, so LG is our answer. So the answer would be D. So well done if you went for D as the second one. Let's have a little look. Yep. Quite a few of you choosing D. And the last one. So this one's a little bit different than the other ones that we've done because you haven't just got 3 images, you've actually got 4. So we're going to have to look really carefully at this. So we've got 2 Fs, and we've got a G, and we've got an H. Now, to identify why the 2 Fs are the same, it's very much to do with the direction the shapes are drawn in. So they're sort of diagonally from bottom right to top left. We need it to be very much sort of upright. So we know that we need an H, first of all, so we can get rid of those 3. And then we've got S-T-U-T. Now, the T's is because of the position of the shape in black, which is at the bottom. Therefore, the U is in the middle, S is at the top. What do we need? We need a U. So the answer to the last one, which a lot of you put, was actually 3C. So well done. Absolutely brilliant. Guys, so good. I'm sorry I can't go through and give you an emoji for every single answer, but absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure a lot of you also managed to do that within the time, which was great. They are described as horizontal codes. Now, the interesting thing with code questions is they can also be presented to children vertically. And vertical codes is something which has been very popular over the last few years in the 11 plus. Interestingly, they actually used to be just 2-letter code. But the exam board, GL assessment, decided that they would make them a little bit more difficult. And by making them more difficult, they actually added 3 letters in. So the 3-letter codes mean that there's obviously a lot more to think about. They're a little bit more tricky to spot. And they're also more time consuming. And I think that's important to realize. If you have now got access now to the GL assessment familiarization papers, which is a link which I put in the chat earlier, this is certainly something, and I'll put it in again just in case anyone arrived late. You can download the non-verbal papers, and the vertical codes, a lot of them are 3-lettered. And I think that's really good to practice. So we do find within the CGP books, they also have 3-letter codes as well, but they're not always as common. So getting your child to practice vertical codes with 3 letters in them is certainly a really, really good idea. Okay, just a little bit conscious of time. So we're going to move on now to talk about matrices. These are also called complete the grid, and a very popular question type in Kendrick, Buckinghamshire and the Slough Consortium. And it means that the children need to understand what shape completes the pattern. Funnily enough, I've often been asked about how else can my child develop their non-verbal reasoning skills at home? Things like spot the difference, jigsaw puzzles. They all have their place in developing your child's non-verbal skills. Spot the difference is all about looking for shapes that are different, shadings that are different, number of things that is different. So don't forget that actually even puzzles and things at home can really develop their non-verbal skills. And certainly with a question like this, one of the games that we often use at Teach It Right is something called Cubics. And I would have thought if your child's in year 4 and now currently in year 5, they've probably had a chance to play that already. But it's a really, really good fun game. And it really does develop, certainly it does link very nicely with matrices because they have to copy a grid. You can play it as a family game. It's a good family game to play. And certainly with Christmas just around the corner, it's a wonderful one to have a go at. So it's called Cubics. I've just put it in the chat there for you. You can often find them on Amazon and really, really do help children develop their dexterity skills as well, but also their non-verbal reasoning as well. So just to explain what the child has to do here. So we have to find the missing shape, but we use the completed columns and completed rows to identify what the pattern is. So I think this one's probably quite an easy one compared to a lot of questions, but we'll just quickly go through what's happening. So on each row, we've got a triangle at the bottom, a triangle at the top, and then a triangle on the right-hand side. We've got the right-hand side triangle here, we've got the one at the bottom, so we know straight away that we need the triangle to be at the top. So we can rule out B, we can rule out C, we can rule out D, and we can rule out E. And that gives us the answer. The other thing, of course, to look at here is the circles, and we have 2 that go horizontally and 1 that goes vertically. So we've got the vertical one there, we've got horizontal. We know we need the 2 circles to be horizontally drawn, hence why I've got 2 horizontal, 1 vertical on the bottom row. Now there's 3 here for you to have a go at yourselves. See if you can work out the answers. If we do it in the same way as we did the last ones, so sorry, we'll scribble out these numbers and we'll make it 1, 2, and 3. See if you can work them out. We'll time it for 1.5 minutes. See if you can work out the missing piece. I'm just going to drag that down here out the way, hopefully. Ooh, to make it a bit smaller. Okay, off you go. Fabulous. Well done, everyone. Uh, Lots of you putting your answers in the chat, which is lovely. Well done. Again, we've got some differences. So again, we can talk about those as we go through. So probably the easiest one is the first one here. We're looking at just a repetition pattern, really. So each row has to contain the blank oval, the hatched oval, and then the two black circles. We're actually missing the black circles over here, so therefore it would be D. Now, in a question like that, I wouldn't necessarily need to eliminate. I'm fairly certain I know the answer. I've got there relatively quickly. I'm going to move on. So sometimes it is about saving time as well. Then we'll have a look at number 2. Now, number 2 does involve you understanding that there's a relationship within the grid. And the interesting thing here is that the middle column, so the shading that we have on this middle shape, which of course is the one that we need, is replicated or repeated over here. So we've got the hatch shading is on the outside here, you can see that. And then this shading here is blank. So whatever the shading is on the outside on this shape, we need to have in here. So I know it's hatched. So this is what we describe as hatch lines here. They're going vertically down. So sometimes I might describe it as being sort of striped. Therefore, it's not B, it's not A, and it's not E. Now, the next thing I need to establish is what shape it's going to be. Because if I compare these two options, one is an oval, one is a rectangle. So if I come back and have a look at the grid, you'll see that we've got 2 ovals here, 2 triangles here. I'm going to need a rectangle to go in there. So I know then that it's not C, that it's got to be D. Okay, interesting, someone changing their mind in the chat. And again, sometimes when someone points it out, you can go, oh yeah, I realised that. So of course, you're looking at the question, always look at that fine detail. Let's now go on to number 3. And this is a very common trick that they play in these kind of questions, where they actually combine the columns together. They get the columns. So if you say that this is column 1, this is column 2, and this is column 3, if it was like a number sum, it would be sort of 1 plus 2 equals 3. So we're combining those shapes together. But what they've done to maybe get you to think a little bit about your sort of right and left hand side of your brain is they have swapped it over. So when they've combined them, they've then changed the dashed lines or the dotted lines into solid lines. So when we come and have a look at ours, they've already changed this top part from the dash to the solid, but we know with the bottom part that is dotted, we need that to be solid. So we can then rule out A, rule out C. It's not got dashed and solid, so it's not D and it's not E. The answer would be B. Again, well done if you managed to get all 3 of those correct. So one of the things I did promise that I would talk about within this workshop is the types of questions that appeared last year. Now, a word of caution here, there is nothing to say that the exam board cannot change the question types every year, and it's not to say that these will necessarily come up next year. But it is to give you an indication of the time allowed and the types of questions that were chosen. So we're going to deal with the 3 different schools and authorities. So we're going to deal with Kendrick. We're also going to talk about the Slough Consortium, and we're also going to talk about Buckinghamshire. So really important to realise that these exams are not the same, but they are set by the same exam board. So GL Assessment, Granada Learning, that's been writing 11 plus exams for years and years, they are sort of in control, if you like, of all 3 of those. So we'll first of all just talk about Buckinghamshire. So as you know, Teacher Right has centres in Buckinghamshire. We have a centre in Gerrards Cross at Thorpe House School. We also run classes in Burnham as well. And we also have a centre at High Wycombe. And certainly for our children there, we will make sure that all these question types are covered. We tend to find it's easier if we do a blanket coverage for all our GL courses, so there's no question type that we don't cover off. So in non-verbal reasoning last year for Bucks, they had 4 sections. Find the shape which is most similar. You might remember those where we had the 2 shapes on the left or the 3 shapes on the left. Rotation, and we will explore that a little bit more when we come to 3D. Codes, which we've obviously just had a little look at, and then analogies or the connection questions, sometimes referred to as pairs. And there were 4 question types, 10 questions per section. they had 5 minutes per section to do that. So again, our sort of 30-second rule really applies here. So those attending at Windsor won't miss on anything. No, absolutely not. No, if you're at Windsor and you're studying with us, then we're delivering a GL assessment course. So no, you will know we won't miss anything. Certainly for Buckinghamshire, even though that centre is in Berkshire, we're still covering all the same question types. So Buckinghamshire, there we go. So again, may want to keep a record of that. And then Kendrick School, we obviously have children in our Reading St Joseph Centre that are going for Kendrick, our girls, and they had only 2 sections last year, vertical codes and the matrices. They had 30 seconds per question, and there were 20 questions per question type. So 40 altogether, and then 10 minutes per section. And then in regards to the Slough Consortium, they have non-verbal reasoning as well. There was codes, the vertical ones, and then they had find the shape which is most alike. So only 2 question types, similar to Kendrick, 20 questions per section, 10 minutes per one. I did say I would talk about that at the end, so I'm hoping that kept you with me this afternoon. Reading boys do not have non-verbal reasoning. No, they don't have to worry about that. That's something that's not included as part of future stories. They have their critical thinking and their creative writing and their maths and their English, but no non-verbal reasoning. Yeah, no non-verbal reasoning. With Christmas around the corner, I did think it might be worth just mentioning a couple of non-verbal games that you may want to explore. Cubics, I've already mentioned. That's that board game. They do a Cubics Extreme, which is a wonderful game, very similar to that one, which has sort of curvy shapes, which is really good fun. Play to pass. I don't believe that's in circulation anymore. So I'm sorry, this is a slightly older slide, but that was a card game. We sometimes use that at Teach It Right. We do use that certainly in our revision camps and things. So it was good fun. Set, which is a nice game just to develop sort of understanding of shape and different parts of the mnemonic there. Joggle, you may have come across before. Sort of involves children jumping over the marbles. Really good fun. A bit like solitaire, if ever you played solitaire, very similar to that. And the reason I put in puzzles is because I think jigsaw puzzles are brilliant for kids to help them with their non-verbal. And the last one down here is Cognosis. I will send out a list of non-verbal games that you may be interested in. There's a few more that I know of, which are really good fun. There is a bit of a limit, I think, sometimes to the non-verbal games that are out there. So sometimes if you can create, spot the difference and things you can print off at home, they're really good fun as well. I am going to leave it there. I think certainly with sort of focusing and doing lots of non-verbal, it can be sometimes difficult to focus for long periods of time on this kind of thing. So well done. Thank you very much for your participation. It's been lovely to have the children answering some of the questions and the children having and the parents having a go as well. We will be doing, as I say, spatial reasoning in the new year. We'll also be doing maths, we're doing creative writing, we're doing English. So those are all to come. But I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I hope you found it useful and informative. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I will just stop my share there and I'll stop the recording. And if you have got any other questions,